Hello, today we're going to look at the past continuous tense form, which is in the USA more often called the past progressive. I was watching a new episode of my favorite series at 8 p.m. yesterday. In this sentence, I was watching a new episode of my favorite series at 8 p.m. yesterday. Was watching is the past continuous form of the verb watch. We use past continuous when we are speaking about some past action in progress, was watching, which was happening at a certain time in the past, at 8 p.m. yesterday. So how do we make the past continuous tense form of verbs? To do this, we need the verb be in its past form, was or were, in this sentence was, and the main verb with the ending ing, like watching, was watching. Repeat after me. I was watching a new episode of my favorite series at 8 p.m. yesterday. He was working out in the morning from 10 to 11:30. So, you remember that past continuous is used when we are talking about some action in progress happening at a certain time. But we also need this tense form when a time period is specified, like in this sentence, from 10 to 11:30. Repeat after me. He was working out in the morning from 10 to 11:30. I missed her phone call while I was watching TV. Past continuous is also used in subordinate clauses starting with while. I missed her phone call while I was watching TV. In this sentence, we have the main clause, I missed a phone call, and the subordinate clause, while I was watching TV. And the action in the main clause was a short action, no process was meant. That's why we use past simple, missed. And the action in the subordinate clause was an action in progress, that's why we use past continuous, while I was watching TV. By the way, when a clause is introduced with when, past simple is more common. For example, she was cooking when her mother came. But when a clause is introduced with the help of while, then we use past continuous. Her mother came while she was cooking. When a complex sentence starts with the main clause, we don't use a comma. She was cooking when her mother came. Her mother came while she was cooking. But when the subordinate clause goes first, we use a comma. For example, when her mother came, comma, she was cooking. While she was cooking, comma, her mother came. We also use a subordinate clause starting with while and the verb in the past continuous tense form when we want to show some background scene or a background situation in the past, like in the following example. They learned a lot about climate change while they were working on the project. So let's go over all the situations when we use the past continuous tense form of verbs. In any way, it shows some action in progress, happening at a certain time. For example, I was watching a new episode of my favorite series at 8 p.m. yesterday. When a time period is specified, he was working out in the morning from 10 to 11:30. With clauses with while, I missed a phone call while I was watching TV, or to show some background scene or a background situation. When her mother came, she was cooking. They learned a lot about climate change while they were working on the project. So let's take a look at the difference between past simple and past continuous. We use past simple when the action was short, completed, or we just state a fact. I entered the room and sat at the window. But we use past continuous when the action was in progress. For example, I was sitting and waiting for the results. We use past simple when one action followed another. He came to me and said hello. But we use past continuous when two actions were happening at the same time and one of them or both were in progress. When her mother came, she was cooking. And there are some verbs which we never use in the continuous form. For example, like. I really liked the film. You cannot say, I was liking the film. But there is one thing in common about past simple and past continuous. Verbs in past simple and past continuous show actions which happened or were happening in the past, and these actions are not connected with the present time. And now look how we make questions in past continuous. Let's take this sentence. He was working yesterday at 7 p.m. And we've got here a typical word order where number 1 or the subject is he, number 2 the predicate was working, and number 3 yesterday at 7 p.m. Now look what happens. So we just put the verb be before the subject, before number 1, and we've got a question. Was he working yesterday at 7 p.m.? More questions. Repeat after me. Why was he working yesterday at 7 p.m.? Where was he working yesterday at 7 p.m.? And it's very easy to make the negative form of past continuous. Look. Just put not after the verb be. Was not. He was not working yesterday at 7 p.m. They were not working yesterday at 7 p.m. And you remember that the short form of was not is wasn't, and were not weren't. Repeat after me. He wasn't working yesterday at 7 p.m. They weren't working yesterday at 7 p.m. But there are also negative questions. To make them, just put was or were before the subject, and not remains in the same place. Repeat after me. Was he not working yesterday at 7 p.m.? Were they not working yesterday at 7 p.m.? But the contraction goes before number 1, before the subject. Wasn't he working yesterday at 7 p.m.? Weren't they working yesterday at 7 p.m.?